Welcome everyone to Mercado Ad Studio here from El Festival de Cannes. Today we have Fer Ribeiro and Sean Summers.
It's going to be the best one.
Yeah.
It's going to be the most fun.
Yeah, the stakes are high. Also, our minds are already dried up, but we'll make our best effort. So the first thing I want to know is what would be one thing that you might take from the festival and apply to your work from now on?
Listen, there is one piece of work I saw in the Palais on Tuesday, I believe, Tuesday night. That was the L'Oreal I'm Worth It documentary. I think it won a gold in Filmcraft. I think that for me, it's kind of a reassurance of what we are doing is right. You know, they brought back the original story of the I'm Worth It slogan and told that story through the documentary. I've heard the terminology brand archaeology quite a lot in the past few months. You know, Fer Machado, one of the most influential CMOs in the world, together with Sean, he uses this terminology that I really like. You know, we have rehearsed for this interview. You know, he uses terminology which I quite like, brand archaeology. When you go back to the history of the brand and trying to get what is timeless about my company and my brand that I can update and bring my brand forward into the future. That piece of work from L'Oreal for me was probably the most moving piece of work I have seen during the whole week. And it was not a Grand Prix, by the way, it was a go.
Right?
Yeah.
Sure.
And I haven't seen anything. Would you believe me that this has been a crazy week? I haven't stopped since Monday morning, from 8 in the morning to 2 in the morning, and I couldn't see a single piece of work.
Yeah, but I did not say work. I said from the whole festival, maybe conversations, meetings. Is there something that kind of stuck with you?
Look, you know what stuck with me, which is something that we're already doing? The need, I think that people should have a bigger bias to action. There's this thing about, you know, playing it safe, because the environment over the last few years has been tough for the industry in general and for many categories. It's almost like, you know, we have reverted too much into playing it safe, and then playing it safe, you know, everyone thinks that let's over research and let's over discuss, you know, what's the idea. And in the end, you know, you spend so much time on the discussion piece that, you know, by the time you execute, you know, it's less relevant. And what I've learned in our industry, you know, is much more important. You have an idea, go and execute it and learn while doing, and have the learning agility to, you know, tweak it as you go. And my learning is that whoever decides to, you know, to start taking some more risks, more bias, you know, to action, and being okay with assuming that the first iteration of whatever campaign they do is not going to be perfect, but I think they're going to have a great advantage. I just don't like the inertia that I've seen. Good ideas, good conversations, but a little bit of a disconnect between the theoretical world or the world of ideas and the world of tangible things executed.
Who do you think is that fault? The agencies or the brands itself?
I think it's a combination. We are all responsible. In the end, you know, I think that the environment doesn't help, the economic environment. You know, everybody's fighting for very little growth. So naturally, you're going to go, you know, for what you feel is a safe brief and a sale campaign. But then I do believe that in that environment, the best way to, you know, gain incremental growth is actually do the opposite of what everyone else is doing. I think that the organizational cultures, you know, traditional organizational cultures, they don't create the conditions for you to take risks, and organizational design in general, you know, creates more bureaucracy and, you know, slows things down, and then your personal incentives are not there. So I think it's a combination of elements. I wouldn't say it's one or the other. We have to change, you know, the entire thing. It's like start over. Everyone knows that Gen AI is going to be a tsunami, but I'm not sure. Maybe by the end of this week, more people understand that this is a real tsunami. This is not like a small incremental change. And sometimes I feel like, you know, the feeling is we're looking at the tsunami coming, and instead of preparing, it's like, you know, it's asking the next guy next to, do you have some blocker? No, I'm
Yeah.
Well, watching it coming, we know it's happening, and, you know, we're not taking action. So, yeah, I think that there's a collective action that needs to be taken. But the reason why I vocal is because these collective actions, you know, never happen collectively. You have to start sort of like a movement. I think that's what we've been trying with Fer to convey in the talk today. It's like, guys, you can do it. If we could do it, we're a small company in Latin America, and we face, tough competition and everything. And I think if we can find more, allies who in different parts of the world, in different categories, start this movement, everyone is going to realize that actually this is the less risky risk that you're going to be taking in your career.
And in the topic of risks, I saw what you did with Brazil constitution. I mean, that type of things are really bold. They have a huge impact, but at the same time, it's like, okay, what happens if suddenly you get on the bad side of government or on the bad side of some community or whatever, and they boycott you or stuff? Like, why take those risks? And how, while taking those risks, you de-risk it a little bit? Like, how do you manage all of that?
Actually, looking at the case again, I had seen it last year. I said, like, shit, wow. My God.
It's scary, man.
You know why? When you're convinced about, what the brand stands for and your process, you just do it. Look, it's impossible to have a point of view and leave everyone happy. We're talking about democracy. We shouldn't be, for us, it's black or white. There are no grays in there. You're either for democracy or you're against democracy, okay? And it shouldn't be that difficult to have a point of view. And we did have a committee. We discussed it with Gaston in the agency, Vale in my team, and myself. We made a decision. We executed it, okay?
How long does the decision take? Like how?
6 hours.
Okay.
It's like, this is the right thing to do.
The bias to action.
It's the bias to action, and what's the worst that can happen? That someone's gonna get pissed off, and because we did the analysis, and someone who's gonna get pissed off is basically against democracy. So I'm happy for that person to be pissed off. Actually, I'm happy to take that stance. What are you talking about?
Okay.
Now, when I look 2 years later, I say like, wow.
Yeah. What was
But
he thinking?
look, I am as convinced. Look, in the moment, it felt like an easy decision, because it was the right thing to do. We know what we stand for. We stand for progress. And when you're clear about that, you execute against that, And you have to, look, if the environment changes and, something is going against that, I think that we have an obligation of, as a brand. It's not just about, talking about how I sell more. Sometimes you have to just go out there and say, put a strong point of view about what's right and what's wrong. We don't operate in isolation, in a bubble. We operate within communities, and that stuff impacts our communities. And I cannot be silent just because I want to play it safe.
Okay.
And by the way, you don't even need to go that far. The word democracy is in the mission statement of Mercado Libre, which was written 25 years ago. You know what I mean? So that's the mission statement of the company.
I mean, but also the slogan was written like a long time ago, and it changed. And this may be also a question for you, Fer. When is the right time to change something that has worked for a while?
In general, I'm a big believer in changing things when you're at the top of your game. I think that the worst time to make a change is when you're already in decline, because you're making it in the wrong conditions. That's why this is a company that's constantly reinventing. I always say that everything we do in marketing and across the company, we try to reinvent it all the time. We try to disrupt ourselves, because if not, someone else is going to come and do it. Having said that, disruption for the sake of disruption. So I would say, I think that our current position in our tagline is super relevant and will continue to be relevant, but the way we bring it to life has to evolve every year. If we go back to creating our brand book on, the way we do communications in Mercado Libre. This is how we do the commercials. It's always, this formulaic, because research has told us, that this is what drives. That's when we are screwed. Okay, so we should never. So I think that as long as the positioning and the tagline continue to be relevant and we execute it in fresh ways, we should be fine. Fair.
No, I think that what you said is so true of Mercado Libre, and it's so rare to find in other clients. I think the expression that comes to mind is a cliche of what brought us here won't take us there. Meli is very ambitious as a company, so what brought us here, when you are the most valuable company in Latin America, will not take us forward. So every time we are at the top, we think, okay, what are the things that we can actually change? So it's a completely different type of mindset, which is very impressive, actually.
Because we assume that if we don't think it, someone else is going to think it. Someone is going to think how to disrupt your business. So let's disrupt ourselves.
Okay, and I know, for example, God has the different clients. Mel is the best one, maybe, but different
by
clients.
far.
Okay, yeah. we are the oldest one. Yeah, let's.
Yeah, but in how is it different to work with a brand like Mercado Libre that is so like has this like manifest and so bold about around their priorities and they're like Babe Ruth, like we're gonna go there and they go for it. How is it different, the process of creating a new idea, a new campaign, than other brands that might come from another side? I don't know, like.
I think, frankly, it was not true. I think all this courage and this momentum that we have created together, it came with time and trust, right? As we presented today, back maybe 5 years ago, we were in the beginning of this journey of courage, of the bravery scale, as you call. So I'm not sure if it's different. I think what happens is that there is more trust involved in the process. So when we say something with which Sean doesn't agree, Sean may say every now and then, you know what, go for it, I trust you. And hearing that from a client that doesn't agree with your idea is very rare because we have a lot of trust. Have I heard that from other clients? Maybe, but it's very rare. So I think the difference is probably the level of trust that we have.
But it's a very important point.
I don't agree, again. I don't agree with
There are no sort of shortcuts. There are no silver bullets. Everyone in this environment of, sort of tough environment, everyone is looking for the shortcut or the silver bullet. There is nothing there. The first 2 years, I think it was about strengthening the basics. We didn't do anything crazy or radically new in the first 2 years. We started executing in the most radical idea is we were super consistent for the first time ever for a couple of years. Doing stuff that was logical, nothing crazy, but suddenly it's like, okay, we have our brand assets that Fer talked today, let's leverage them and, what else can we do with them? Once that was in place with a strong foundation, so I say, okay, let's take some calculated risks. That's what you do. Nobody's gonna go like Babe Ruth, try to go for the home run every single time. So the first things that we did, probably they weren't slightly uncomfortable, but they weren't crazy. And when you see that it works, okay, let's go for the next one. And the crazy thing was that then for the following 2 years, probably each of these crazy ideas needed to have sort of a discussion. And that's when we got to the middle of the scale. And I think that now every single idea, the expectation is that let's go for the fences. Let's bat for the fences, okay? Because now we have the momentum. Actually, we believe that it's the thing that keeps us half a step or one step ahead of competition. When you face a lot of competition, we are obsessed with how do we stay one step ahead.
Okay, you have these really popular campaigns. They've won a bunch of prizes and stuff.
And they sold a lot.
And they've sold effective campaigns. Right now, the conversation tends to go around data and around we make the campaigns based on the data, based on how the consumer is behaving. And I would like to ask, like, honestly, what percentage of those decisions come really from data first, rather than like a feeling or like a?
This I can give you a very pragmatic answer, and maybe a couple of answers. One is sometimes the idea is intuition first, then data. Data will give us the evidence that intuitive idea will work. Sometimes it's the other way around. We find something through data that help us make a leap that gets us to an idea, right? And I think there are those two ways. I think if you look at the work that we saw today, you have a quite even split. Some ideas came from data, analyzing, for example, that a new feature within Call of Duty is trending, and a lot of players are enjoying it. That came from data. It's not intuition. That is trending. Let's do something about it. Let's call of discounts a grand winner.
But you have to do something. The data doesn't tell you anything other than an insight. Then you have to create something on top of that.
You need a leap on top of it. Yeah.
So the creativity has to be on top of that.
And sometimes it comes from intuition, right? In the case
many times.
Many
times the campaigns.
The elbow-to-elbow change of logo, that's intuitive. It's saying, our logo has a handshake in it. You gotta do something. There's no data telling you that. Well, headlines are telling you that. You know what I mean? So I think there are those two types of processes when it comes to getting to ideas. And I would say though, if you look across all the work, 100% of it, there is a lot of data involved. Because data is a very broad concept, right? You have data sometimes in development, debriefing a problem, developing ideas, deploying ideas, and then analyzing if the idea is working or not. So there is always data involved at some point in the process. It's always involved in the measurement stage, but sometimes it's in deployment. How we deploy ideas through media takes a lot of data. How we understand the problem that Sean is briefing us with, and you go, okay, we need to dig deeper. So let's use data to understand what the actual problem is. So there's always data involved. But when it comes to the execution itself, sometimes it's data first, sometimes it's intuition first.
I would say the creation of the campaigns, my intuition is that they are mostly intuition. Then on the execution side, the entire, let's say, you can have the best creative, if you don't have the right media plan, you're not going to amplify it. There's tons of data and a lot of sophistication there. And then the measurement, not just of the typical, deployment of a campaign, but, understanding, look, this creative, people disengage after 5 seconds, So it's informing you back as part of the learning, the retrofit. Okay, why is it that after, we thought that people would get to the end. Well, maybe in this medium, you cannot go past 10 seconds, and so it's useful data. But that doesn't mean that, and sometimes I'm still surprised that people keep talking about it's either data or creative. They're highly complementary, but in different stages. Look, I was mentioning it today, we have a highly sophisticated demand generation engine. Every single function in marketing is towards generating more demand. Our creativity is geared towards that. We have a lot of performance marketing in Google, Meta, TikTok, Pinterest, you name it. We buy media digitally with very sophisticated models. We buy media offline with more traditional, but everything is connected. There are things that we can measure better than others, but they work all together,
Yeah. And is there ever a right time to ignore data? Ignore what's going on and just go for...
Yeah, absolutely. When you have, absolutely. The way I tell my team in general how to think is this demand generation engine is super efficient. Because it is super efficient, you could have the tendency to say, I'm going to put 100% of my money on this stuff because they are bringing, the new affiliates program, the new creators program. Everything is working really well. My role as CMO is to force the team to say, no, let's maximize the output of this engine, everything, every channel, every initiative. Let's try to deliver, let's invest 85% of our money there, but let's make sure that it delivers 95 or even 100% of the output so that we have the flexibility to do 10 or 15% of the investment on stuff that is very intuitive that I cannot prove to you what's the return. Let me give you the very clear example that I had the conversation I have today. Currently, the investment in Formula One sponsorship with Colapinto from a purely, our numerical models is not going to pay back. I don't even try to tell my clients on the business side that that's the case. It's a bet. It's a bet that, if we can help Franco become a successful Formula One driver, the impact, that creates in our audience, in terms of everyone knows this is not a traditional, sponsorship where we have a logo somewhere there. Like, we are working with him to help him develop. If it doesn't work out, okay, it didn't work out, we learn something. If it works out, wow. How many brands in the world can say that, they played such an instrumental role in helping a great talent, a great Argentinian, Latin American entrepreneur succeed on a global scale?
Okay, that's amazing. What are some ideas that tend to be said right now? For example, like the one you said about separating data and creativity, that you think are not right?
I can speak for myself. I have made mistakes my career in thinking something was right, and it turned out not to be right. So I don't know. I actually, at this point in our trajectory as an industry, I tend to believe people, in their minds, they're doing the right thing. I think the intention is usually a good intention, but sometimes the context is more complex than they thought it was. So then what you're doing turned out to be not right. I wouldn't name. Like,
I'll
it's
change
hard-
it.
it's
I'll make
hard-
it easier.
No,
but I'll
can,
make
no,
it
can I
easier.
give you an answer? Because
Yes,
I have
please.
I have
He's
an
braver
answer.
than me.
No. Look, I have an answer, and I changed my mind over the last year. Between both camps,
Uh-huh.
I thought that the creative industry, was screwed with the Gen AI. Last year, I said, wow, these guys are screwed. And nowadays, I'm coming out really bullish that Gen AI is going to be a fantastic tool to amplify the work of creators, to make it more productive, so more efficient for everyone involved. But I'm probably some campaigns here and there are going to be done by, Gen AI, and it's great. But I don't think that that's going to replace entirely, the creative power, the ingenuity of, human beings. I am more convinced that ever. I don't know if 50%, if you ask me today, for a number, I would say, I'm sure that at least 80% of the good creative works are going to continue to be done by humans. Maybe it's 90. Maybe I'm wrong, it's 50, but look, it's not Gen AI is going to replace 100% of the creative. I am more convinced than ever. We can all have access to the same tools, and we're going to then create very efficiently, very undifferentiated campaigns. So, and I changed my mind.
Yeah.
And I changed my mind over the last year on that.
Let's see what happens next year.
Huh?
But I'm gonna do a little bit of like pushback.
Push him. Yeah, push
but
him. I like it.
It's not that
Friday
they're
afternoon,
wrong, but
Friday afternoon, he's tired. It's the moment to push him.
it's more like what's something that you think is being misunderstood, that you think people are saying, like for example the AI, AI is gonna come and change whatever, and
Yeah.
you say like, no, that I don't think they're understanding it correctly.
Yeah,
and
there's so
saying
many cliches that turn out to be very wrong, right? TV is dead. That's one. Advertising is dead. Data is gonna be the thing we were all talking about. That's like, I don't know, 7-8 years ago. I don't know. I think there are a lot of things turned out to be, they were headlines here in Cannes, and people, they gave talks about advertising is dead and TV is dead and data is gonna take over and AI is gonna take over. And they turn out to be wrong. I think at the end of the day, there is a tweet that one of our two co-founders did 5 years ago that was, data is nothing without gut. And for me, if you replace the word data literally for whatever you want that is related to our industry, it works. Data, AI, strategy, research, all of the things, they're just not as valuable without gut, without human beings, without intuition. So I think that
it was a great,
Right.
yeah.
It's Friday afternoon, mate. His brain, this guy he's been working for the last 5 days non-stop.
We're almost done. We're almost done. I have two more things I wanna ask you guys. That was a really good answer. That was a really good answer. I would like to know now the other side. What's an opinion you guys have that you think not many people share with you, like not as such a popular opinion?
I can tell you one that is going to be controversial because
Right.
I'm going to write about it. As I've heard some conversations this week about the impact of Gen AI, I saw too many people worried about, sustainable AI, diverse AI, brand safety, responsible AI, all topics that are super important, but everyone is missing the point. You have to park all those very valid concerns to a side and figure out how AI is going to change the world, because it's happening, like it or not. And while everyone is debating, how to do it, and you will never find a solution that leaves everyone, an answer, it's not even a solution, an answer that leaves everyone happy. You will never get to anything tangible if you leave it just in the world of the ideas and the discussions. And I'm encouraging everyone, and I'm going to write about this, which is, this is coming. The thing about Gen AI doesn't give a shit about how you feel about these things. It's happening. We could be here in Cannes as an industry having all these conversations. Gen AI has moved forward this week. It's not going to stop. So I go back to the concept of bias to action, identify, let's try to help everyone to understand how Gen AI could impact you if you were trying to give your first steps, on actual tangible stuff. Where should you be looking at? And, probably what are the tools that can help you make those first steps. And you know what? Yes, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty as to where those first steps take you. But, staying frozen here and using these very valid topics as an excuse not to make any move, I think that is insane. And I made a lot of enemies in the industry with that statement.
Now, I'll just retweet that. So, you
Okay.
create enemies together.
Perfect. Now it's you against the world. Okay, one last question. This is more personal. You guys are challengers. You guys are kind of, as you just said, going against the current or what's going on. But you're doing it successfully. So, what could be some of the main learnings or the principles, los principios that you guys follow that had put you in this position?
First, taking a long-term view. No, there are no short-term quick fixes, okay, to most of these problems. Second, the bias to action. You can analyze and research a lot of ideas for as long as you want without making any move forward. You're not going to get anywhere. So Mercado Libre, we always assume that we're going to screw it up the first, probably the second and the third time, but we're going to learn something in each of those times. So by the time that we get to a minimal viable product, but it didn't come out from theoretical research. It came from, there is rigor, in the analysis. We'll put smart people, the fewest amount of people possible, to analyze the problem or the opportunity, okay? We debate, and let's say that debate lasts, 1 hour, maybe it's 1 day, depending on, and then we understand what are the alternatives, and we make a conscious choice with the available information. There will always be, missing information. Okay, let's go this way. We execute, and if 1 day, 1 week, or 1 month later we realize that we were wrong, no problem. We change, we course correct, we move into the next best option. That, at the beginning, feels scary. You start seeing some results. Sometimes the results are more effectiveness in what you do. Sometimes are more efficiency. You build some confidence. There's always a first step that you have to. There are no magical solutions. Suddenly you realize that you can tackle more than one issue in parallel with this approach. And then it just happens, You have a lot of smart, well-intentioned people in this industry, in all the companies and all the brands that I met. So it's not a matter of talent. It's a matter of creating the conditions for that talent to operate. How do you create the right incentive so that it's not everything about the short term? Because if not, it's impossible, to make the change. How do we change the organizational design to simplify decision making? How do you change internal processes to make sure that you can be fast and agile and not a bureaucracy? And how do you change culture so that failing, it's okay? I started in Pepsi when I was 20. Fantastic, great team, and I was learning a lot. At 23, I had an idea to be an entrepreneur. I never thought that I would be an entrepreneur. And there was a part of me that told me, continue here in Pepsi, this is the safe route. I said, if I cannot take a risk at 23, I'm screwed. That was the logic. If I cannot, so I took the risk. I raised the money. I launched the startup. I scaled it. I didn't reach break even. I had to close it down. That was part of the learning experience. Okay, that didn't turn me into, it didn't kill me, exactly. I went back to corporate life. But I said, look, there's something about this mindset of being a challenger and taking risks. I continue my career. I then go and do my, I'm doing well in PepsiCo. I am now in Mexico. And I always wanted to do my MBA. And it was a personal objective. It wasn't about money. It was about intellectual challenge. It didn't make any sense financially at that stage in my career to do it. I did it. Why? Because it was about myself, and it was about thinking 10, 15 years from the moment. I took a risk. And at some point I said, is corporate life and this environment that I just described, the one where I'm going to thrive? Probably not. I'm doing well. Do I get energy from this? No. I did a counterintuitive move. I moved to Twinings for many reasons. That was a more entrepreneurial environment. So every time I'm taking a risk, it's working. Actually, I would say every one of my biggest and best moves, being a conservative guy, have been when I took risk. And then a few years later, that prepared me to have a conversation with Mercado Libre. It didn't make any sense for Mercado Libre to hire me because I was selling tea in the UK. And well, because we think he has learning agility and he has the right attitude and he brings some complementary skills. And you know what? He has shown us at least 3 times over the last 10 years, he took risk. And we are a company of risk takers. And then once I go to Mercado Libre, I realized, oh, I finally found my place. And that's an environment where I've been able to grow and evolve with the company. And look, I have screwed up the same way that many people have done it, but you know, we have learned. So now, 13 years later, I find it very difficult. You know, I wouldn't say that I wouldn't be able to do it, but my natural environment is clearly this one. And that's why I'm so happy operating here. And look, not only I'm happy, I'm very effective and very successful in this environment. Let's be clear, these environments, I leverage this environment. Sean Summers in Mercado Libre, and let's be clear about this because I really believe. Sean Summers in Mercado Libre, his performance is 3x what it would be in any traditional company. And I'm the same person, but I'm conscious that I operate in an environment where I can thrive with a team of really smart people that we complement each other. So that's why, you know, I get vocal about let's create the conditions. I'm not that smart. You know, I'm less smart than the average people coming here. But I do realize that with the right conditions, a lot of people here, you know, could really thrive and be as happy as I am today.
Great, thank you. What about you, Fer?
I think the last part is amazing, by the way. It's like Neymar playing for Barcelona versus playing for Santos. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Barcelona is playing with Messi and Suarez, right? It's the same. Like at gut, I perform better than in any other regions I could be working at. So I think my father taught me how to do a lot with a little. I think the value of resourcefulness came from my father. And my mother taught me the value of care and caring a lot about what you're doing and the outcome of the things that you are invested in. So I think those two things, being resourceful, learning how to do the things myself, not, you know, being forced to rely on other people to do things every time and on tools and on money and on resources. I think that was very important throughout my career. I'm from the south of Brazil. You know, even planning and strategy as a discipline was not very developed when I started at that time. So I think that was important. And then care, you know, like just really caring about the things that I do. I heard that from David Droga, actually, in the interview in the Palais a couple of days ago. And I was like, that's it, man. If there is one thing that drives me today, is that when I look at that slide, a deck, listen, I think I create 10 decks a day, you know? And every single slide and word in it matters. I care about it. Oh, is it creating value for gut and our clients? Every single word that I spend 10 minutes trying to, you know, articulate, I'm not sure. But it's very internal and it's very personal. So
He's a
I
fantastic
think so.
storyteller, by the way.
I think finally, you know, and this is it's probably a very personal take on my discipline of strategy and advertising. When I said I am a creative strategist back in the day, I would feel like people would be a little, he's just a creative strategist. You know, he's lesser of a strategist because he's a creative strategist. And I was in doubt of, you know, my value and my role back in the day. Maybe that's like 10 years ago. And I think somehow someone told me, stick to it. That's your thing. It's not a lesser of a thing. It can be your biggest thing.
That's your superpower.
Yeah, it might be just your superpower. And I think today I'm like, that's it. That's what I do. I love doing it. That's what I do for a living, and I will do for the rest of my life. So I think, those three things, I would say.
Amazing. Thank you, Fer. Thank you,
No,
Sean.
thanks for the question.
I
It's really
loved
good.
it. I got goosebumps.
No.
So
I'm
thank
really
you so
happy
much.
that we went off script. You know,
Which script? I never received that script.